Greetings everybody. I'd like to present to you a short presentation about homeschooling. Homeschooling, which I call a family affair. My name's Terry Harding, so welcome to this presentation on homeschooling. Just a little bit of background about myself. I've been involved in education for a long time. My wife and I have 5 children, and for over 15 years we'd home educated our 5 children. But I've also got a background in teaching and being a principal in a number of schools in various states around Australia. Also, I've had a hand in establishing non-government schools of distance education in the states of Queensland, New South Wales and WA. And I've been managing Australian Christian homeschooling since 1994, right up to the present. I've also had a role in informing both state and Commonwealth education ministers regarding issues around homeschooling and non-government distance education. And I also love research, and I've researched into both homeschooling and distance education, and have master's and doctoral degrees that have involved that sort of research. But I just want to bring to your attention, as I said, it's a family affair. And so that's a photo of me and some of my kids, and my wife and I were homeschooling a long, long time ago. In fact, last millennium. And family's a thing that grows, and there are some of our kids and our grandkids now involved in various aspects of education. This session, however, I want to present to you a little bit of a background to home education or homeschooling, whichever term you wish to use. A bit of background about parents, socialisation and academics in home education. Secondly, I'd like to just do a little brief history on home education in Australia. And thirdly, I want to talk specifically about Australian Christian homeschooling, and I'm a manager of that particular institution, which has been supporting home education families since 1982, and I've been so pleased to be able to be a part of that, and we've assisted tens of thousands of families over that period. Firstly, I'd like to talk about parents being educators. It's true that parents are the original educators. You know, parents have helped their children to learn their native language from scratch, all the way through to being competent speakers of their language around the age of 5 or 6 years old. Parents are educators. In fact, a very famous study by Deforge and Abouchar in the United Kingdom was a meta-analysis of over 300 publications looking at how education was formed and improved in children. And I'll read this quote to you. Good parenting in the home is demonstrated by providing a secure and stable environment, intellectual stimulation, parent-child discussion, good models of constructive social and educational values, and high aspirations relating to personal fulfillment and good citizenship is the key factor in the educational development of children, and that other forms of parental involvement do not appear to contribute to the scale of the impact of at-home parenting. So parents are deemed to be educators of their children, whether they think they are or not. I also love the quote from Pope John Paul II, and he put it this way. He talked about parents having a right and a duty to give education to their children, and parents all do. But let's quote Pope John Paul II on this matter. The right and duty of parents to give education is essential, since it is connected with the transmission of human life. It is original and primary with regard to the educational role of others on account of the uniqueness of the loving relationship between parents and children. And it is irreplaceable and inalienable, and therefore incapable of being entirely delegated to others or usurped by others. What a wonderful, holistic statement to describe the unique educational factor that parents have with respect to their children. Well, the context of home education is the family. And there are families all over Australia and beyond that are home educating. The family is the location for home education. The children are learning in and also around the family home. And parents are mediators of that education. The famous educationist Vygotsky made it very clear as to the importance of how parents are mediators of education to their children in real life relationships that go beyond just 1 year, that goes right through into adulthood. And the family is a community of practice, a community of educational practice. And I have a reference down here on the page to John Barrett Peacock's thesis on homeschooling, which he did in 1997. We had many of our students as a part of that research piece. And he was talking about the family as a community of learning practice. But home educators are not just only in the family, as some might imagine. They're in the wider community in a natural setting throughout their educational careers. They're learning in and around that broader community. There are tutors and experts. They attend social groups. They attend learning groups. So home educated kids are not just stuck in the family, but they are grounded in the family, which is that community of learning practice. So Peacock called this broader group a super community of learning practice. And so the children who are home educated have a broader identity of themselves in that broader community. So here we see a mum with some hats on, and she has certain roles in her life, as she is a home educator, as too is a father. And so there we have the family home, and let's put her in home. There she is. So she's in there as the mother who's going to home educate her children. So we better give her a couple of kids. There they are. And let's also, looking at what Barrett Peacock suggested, that home education is not just in the family home, but is in the broader community. And this is a natural factor and a great learning experience for kids in home education. I just want to look at Merton's theory of role theory. I did a study into this as I was working on my research into home education, and Merton showed that there are different layers of roles in a person's life. And here we have the top role I've looked at, and it is the role of the parent. You go down one level and you see that the parent has multiple roles as carer and as supplier of protection and food and shelter. But I've just put in that second layer, parent is a home educator. And underneath that, what are the roles of the parent as a home educator? And my research found that there were 4 major roles: the role of a learner, the role of a partner, the role of a teacher, and the home educator took the role of a pioneer. There we have that broad community interaction again. So we'll look at these roles just briefly, and I can mention them in detail or provide further detail for any who are interested. But here we have a mother and a father. They are a learner, and in the research it said that the home educating parent as a learner was learning about the education system, learning about what their child needed to learn, and they were learning about their child, and finally they were learning about home education. Second hat, they called themselves a partner. Now, not like a marriage or a relationship partner. It was a partner in an educational endeavour, so that one partner in that would be like the role of a principal. They would fulfil the role of a teacher. They would fulfil various roles that we see as roles in schools. Home educators took this role as an educational partnership, and they took it upon themselves for the purpose of providing education for their children. Thirdly, most obviously, they said that they took on the role as a teacher of their children. That's to be expected. And finally, they took on the role of a pioneer. Now, as a pioneer, they saw themselves as an educational pioneer, that they were reconceptualizing the idea of education, that the family could be a foundational location and site for education. So they were reconceptualizing the role of the family as an educational site. And conversely, they were reconceptualizing the role of education. So the role of family and the role of education were both being radically reassessed in this home education movement. So here we are, the four major roles that home educators saw as their roles as they educate their children. Underneath here, I have a reference to the PED. I call that the parental educational dynamic. And the parental educational dynamic is the role of the parent who is a teacher in the life of the child, and it's based on the trust relationship between the child and the parent. What the parent says, the child will believe. And that makes a wonderful educative relationship. I remember when my young son said to me, and he would have been 3 years old, "What day is it, Daddy?" And I said to him, "Son, today is Tuesday." Now, he did not know what a Tuesday looked like, tasted like, felt like, but he trusted me. And that is what I mean by the parental educational relationship. That young boy knew that it was Tuesday because his dad had told him, and he trusted his dad's teaching. Okay, I have a list of the roles in different colours. The role of the learner, the parent as the learner, the parent as an educational partner, having a close partner relationship, the role of a teacher, a close parent-child relationship, and the role as a pioneer, which relates more to the wider community. And so we see the outcome of these roles is that in home education, there is a new type of educator. There is a new form of educational administration within that family. There is a contextualized educator teaching in the real world to the child that he or she understands better than anybody else. And finally, as a pioneer, there is a new participant on the educational landscape. That is, home educating parents. Now, people talk about socialisation and often don't know what it is, so I thought I'd just bring that into this little talk. What is socialisation? And so we have Durkin, who is a fully qualified psychologist, teaching at universities and writing papers and books. And Durkin said this, that socialisation is the process whereby people acquire the rules of behaviour and systems, beliefs and attitudes that equip a person to function effectively as a member of a particular society. So home educators socialise their children by helping them to understand their cultures, behaviour, systems, beliefs and attitudes so that that child can function effectively in their society. He further said that socialisation takes place as children participate in daily routines which immerse them directly in the values of their community. Note that section there which says immersing them directly in the values of their community. A very natural process in the family context and the broader community. There's a very famous experiment that another psychologist conducted, Larry Shires. He had his PhD students have homeschooled children and traditionally schooled children in rooms where they would play and interact. And he, as a psychologist, said that it would be normal if they did naughty things occasionally. That's quite normal for human beings. And he called the amount of normal problem behaviour, he called that the problem behaviour rating. And he said normal problem behaviour is about 1 to 6. And I have that there on the sheet. He had children who were matched for age, for gender, for race, and he had them placed in these rooms and they videoed their activities and they recorded problem behaviours between these children. And he found, as the graph illustrates, the home-educated 8-year-old boys recorded a problem behaviour rating on average about 4 times, doing something wrong or foolish or naughty 4 times. But the traditionally schooled kids of the same age and gender, male, 8-year-old, recorded a 16. The same too for the females, 8-year-old females, the girls recorded 2 as an average problem behaviour rating, whereas girls in the traditionally schooled mode recorded 21. And so the pattern goes through to your 10-year-olds. The home-educated males recorded a 6, which is right on the border of normal problem behaviour, and the traditionally schooled 10-year-olds recorded 22 non-social or antisocial behaviour. So it's an interesting experiment. It's not to say home-educated kids are perfect or that kids in schools are dysfunctional, but it's an interesting comparison that Larry Shires conducted. He concluded from the study that these children, traditionally schooled children, tended to be considerably more aggressive, loud and competitive than were the homeschooled children of the same age. This finding supports the belief held by some homeschool proponents that home-educated children are socially well-adjusted. So it's a myth to say that children who are home-educated are not socially adjusted. It implies the only way you can be socially normal is to go to a school. So it's this experiment, this study, just throws a lot of doubt on the assumption that schools are the only way for a child to be socialised. So there are social benefits of home education. It avoids the bullying in school. It avoids the negative peer pressure where it's cool to be naughty or it's cool to not learn. It avoids those things or those expectations. Children who are home educated, and the research shows they become less peer dependent. It avoids where children are just restricted to a single aged group of kids for 13 whole years, which gives them a limited level of knowledge. They're just associated with their age peers, and it gives them a limited degree of experience in life, being just for 13 years with the same age peer group. Children learn from responsible adults. They can learn from siblings and the broader community, rather than just mostly from their age peers, as I've already said. And it's interesting, one educator, John Hattie, said that he believed that 80% of influence in the class is undetected by a classroom teacher. And that's fair enough. How can a classroom teacher know everything that's going on in terms of the social dynamic of a group of 25 children? The social benefits also indicate that home education encourages personal character development, that good is cool. Study or reading or literacy is a cool thing. You're allowed to be able to develop your own values. And the students are able to be themselves, not living to the expectation of others in the peer age group. So it's also an advantage in terms of social development that the children are learning in the real world rather than being located in an institution for 13 years of their formal learning. And it allows children to be socially comfortable with all ages, not just their age peers, to be respectful of those children or adults that are older, and to be caring and nurturing to children who are younger. So it's a more natural setting for social development. There are also academic benefits, and that includes that there is flexibility. That's one of the key issues for home education, that flexibility of home education suits academically gifted kids. Children who are highly talented in sports or the film or arts or media, children who have fallen between the cracks and haven't performed well in school. The flexibility allows for them to catch up and to get their academic needs met. Children who are disengaged from schooling for whatever reason, the flexibility of home education allows them to regain and remediate their education. It helps for kids who have special needs. It could be special health needs, special psychological needs, special learning needs. The flexibility is wonderful to allow the homeschooling child to be adapted to learning at their level and at their rate of learning. Special health needs we've talked about, psychologically damaged kids who've been maybe bullied at school. It's wonderful. And also it's helpful for families that are travellers. So there are many academic benefits. Now I just want to go to the second level of this talk and talk about just a little brief history. Home education, surprise, surprise, predates government. And it predates government-controlled education. We're not the new kid on the block. So in Australia in 1788, which was the commencement of European colonisation of Australia, in the very first year, there were dame schools in homes. So the first formal education in Australia was done in homes. Isabel Rossin was doing it in Sydney, and she was charging sixpence for educating the children of the military, and for children of the convicts, she was just educating them in her home for nothing. Thomas McQueen was doing similar in Norfolk Island, and so too Elizabeth Johnson in Parramatta in the first year or two of colonisation. There's been a development, though, of schooling. The church in particular took a great interest, and still does have a great interest, in education and formal schooling. And later the state caught up. And in Australia we have what we call the dual system, which is state and non-state education. Government education and independent schooling. So we have this dual system today. However, in the late 1970s and early 1980s, there were so many perceived changes in schooling that many parents found that it was too rigid, and also that there was, in terms of what was being taught in the schools, there was a departure from traditional values. And so parents started to say, I can home educate my kids at home. I will do that. And that's where the modern home education movement has developed in Australia. There were what I call intellectual disruptors, people who thought differently about education, mainly Americans, Raymond and Dorothy Moore, who wrote Better Late Than Early, Ivan Illich, who wrote Deschooling Society, a famous work, globally famous, John Holt, a famous home educator who wrote Growing Without Schooling, and he had that as a journal and magazine for many years prior to his death, and other folk who were instrumental in encouraging homeschooling, such as Greg Harris. He wrote The Christian Homeschool. So the modern homeschool movement in Australia was initially majority Christian people. They felt, particularly with respect to Christian values and family-based values, that they should start to home educate their children. And so in 1982, Australian Christian Academy, which is now Australian Christian Homeschooling, commenced serving the needs of 6 families in Queensland. And that was the beginning of our group called Australian Christian Homeschooling. It's now blossomed to a nationwide organisation, and we've served since then tens of thousands of families and their children. But it wasn't only a Christian movement. Later, more and more people started jumping into home education, and so it grew to a broader philosophical base than just religious needs and values. In the 1990s, governments commenced to increase regulation of home education. They saw that it was starting to grow and that they needed to regulate. And there was resistance to regulation by some families. Some homeschoolers went underground because of some of the tough regulation requirements. However, happily, that's all changed. There was an example of Justice Carrick's inquiry in 1991 into homeschooling, and he derived a number of regulations and laws from that inquiry. I wrote a paper with a professor of education in 2003 to explain these things about what was legal and what was proper. So today, all states now, and territories of course, all states and territories now have appropriate regulation for home education. Now, there are different models of homeschooling or home education. The first model I would call the structured model. Now, the structured model is a model where there is a full curriculum program that parents can purchase. Australian Christian Homeschooling provides that. And of course, it's not a complete package because parents have their own issues they want to bring in. They want to have swimming lessons. They want footy and netball. They want chess club. They want all these other wonderful activities. They want to do art in a special way. So, but the structured program has a structured curriculum program. It's not school at home. Don't ever be fooled by that. It's not school at home. No home education family is like a school. I've been in schools. I know what schools are like. They have certain requirements, policies, and rules. And home education is totally different to that, even though some people say, oh, a structured program, that's just school at home. That's not correct. The next group in the structured area are the eclectic home educators. They will purchase various products, educational products from bookshops, from newsagents, from the internet, from all over, and they cobble that together for their child's home education. And that's their prerogative. And that's a very excellent form of home education. Then the second group is called unstructured. They are more child-directed groups. They are called unschoolers or natural learners or child-directed learners, and they take a different approach. But the children are learning in a quality home environment and in the broader community. So there are the two basic groups, the structured and the unstructured. And quite frankly, in my experience since being a manager of home education since 1994, both groups overlap. The structured groups have always got unstructured activities, and the unstructured groups, they will take on board certain formal things, such as, say, a textbook or a course on an internet or TAFE college or whatever. So, but they are the two broad differences. Australian Christian Homeschooling has particular processes. So now I've covered the general homeschooling climate. I would like to just hone in on our group, which is Australian Christian Homeschooling, because it's quite a unique group and it covers a wonderful pedagogical approach. So here we go. We have the opportunity for families and students to enrol with Australian Christian Homeschooling, or ACHS. They enrol. We give the parents a training course on the use of the curriculum. We have a specific curriculum that is a self-instructional curriculum, and we train the parents in the use of that curriculum so they can be confident when they start. We give each student an online academic diagnosis in maths, in English, in reading and in spelling. And that helps us to place the children at their success level, at their ability level. They could be high in maths and low in reading, or vice versa. Weak in spelling, strong in science. So we diagnose every single student as they come into Australian Christian homeschooling. We then our staff develops a curriculum prescription that fits their academic diagnosis. We have parent-teacher consultations just so that the parents can see the prescription and say, our staff will say to them, do you think this fits? Does this look right to you? Let's try it and see. We also provide online enhancement resources, things that are little videos or short games that will enhance the work the children do in their curriculum. And so we teach them the way to set up a learning environment, and the kids commence work. We provide tutoring if needed, but it's homeschooling, it's not scholastic teaching, so it's not reliant on a teacher. The teacher is built into the curriculum. Here we have an example. We have a database where we have the family's details, we have each student's details, and we're able to assist and provide reports, etc. Here's an example. This is an example of our online student diagnosis. And we find, if we look at this graph, down the left-hand side, we have year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And we find this particular student, Mary Jones, she's done her diagnostic testings, and the staff of Australian Christian Homeschooling have diagnosed that she's in year 4 in maths and year 4 in English, which would be normal for her, but she's an advanced reader, and so she's in year 6 humanities and science, and year 5 spelling levels. It's just an example to show that we can create a diagnosis and prescribe curriculum at the child's real learning levels, rather than saying, you've had a birthday, therefore you're in grade 3. We train the parents. We have a 5-hour course, which is online. Parents finish that and they get a certificate, and it's competency-based. We just teach them how to use the curriculum. It is online parent training, or if they haven't got access to the internet, then there is a DVD which gives them training with paper units to work through. We give bi-monthly newsletters, so we keep the training and the encouragement going. And of course, we have online resources even on our online platform called Canvas, and it helps parents in the administration and in the work through of the curriculum. So here's an example of the parent training. Here's a DVD of the training course, but now, as I say, it's online as well. And most parents do it online, but if they haven't got online access, we can help with that through DVD training. Academics are critical, and that's why most people are jumping into homeschooling. They want to see their children learning and growing and developing. So as I said, we have diagnostic tests in maths, English, reading and spelling. We then individually prescribe the program to the children, and that's a 3-tiered learning support program. We teach the children and the parents how a child can set their goals, their academic goals, each day. And I'm going to show you a graphic of that goal chart for daily goal setting in a minute. The parent is a supervisor and is trained as such. The parent does not have to be teaching all the time. The teacher is in the curriculum. The parent is a supervisor. And so you do not need a degree to be a teacher in a homeschool setting with Australian Christian homeschooling. As I said, the teacher is written into the curriculum, and it allows the parent to work with their children in encouraging and growing them and finding answers and helping them. They do not have to invent a curriculum, or they do not have to be constantly teaching. Most children do around 60 units of work per year. That means they would you believe, 240 formative tests per year. The tests are built into the curriculum. And then ultimately they do, because they do about 60 units per year, they do about 60 summative or final tests each year. So ultimately the kids get used to testing. Testing is another test. Yeah, they get used to it. It's not a time of stress. Our pass mark for academics is 80% because it's what we call mastery-based learning. So the children get that 80% pass mark before they go on to the next unit and the next one and keep growing and growing. We have Year 10 certificates, Year 12 certificates. We help students with admission to university and college and TAFE. So we provide those services, those educational services as well. What I wanted to show here is that every family that's homeschooling is distinct from every other one. And so, as I said, some families will have an emphasis on music. Some families have an emphasis on sports or church or farming or animal husbandry. So every homeschooling family has clear distinctives that characterize their individual approach to homeschooling. This is not one size fits all by any means. Academic benefits, the flexibility we've talked about, students work at their own academic performance level. They're on success pathway from the start because they start at where they're able to learn and able to grow and able to perform. They learn at their own pace. It doesn't matter if they go fast or slow or average. It does not matter. The main issue is they get that learning unit, they get the learning, and they pass at 80% before they go on to the next learning unit. The students can follow their own interests. In my case, in our family's case, our students, our children were able to follow their areas of interest in computing, in sports, in videography, in language and reading. And so the child can have a foundational, strong academic course, but also able to follow their own interests. There's no time limit. There's no time limit. Now, in traditional schooling, the constant is time. You have 5 days of a week, 40 weeks of the year, 4 terms in that year, and so time is the constant, and learning is the variable. Learning is the variable means that some kids will learn in that school environment that much. Other kids will learn that much. In home education, where there is a pass mark of 80%, it's the exact opposite. Time is the variable, whether it takes a long time or short time. And learning is the constant, 80% every time. It's a very interesting way to learn. And they're learning in the real world, as we've already mentioned. And also the academic benefits of having both formal and informal learning. Movies, books, magazines, lots and lots of talk, lots of conversational learning. And you're free to go to various locations and movies and excursions in a time frame that suits the family. Academics, Australian Christian homeschooling, we have the core subjects of maths, English, literature, spelling, history, geography and science. There are elective subjects for primary and secondary, 40 plus numbers of electives, plenty of options to choose. So there's an example of our learning to read courses. Here are some examples of the different units. There's some maths and nutrition science and social studies and novels and literature and word building, history, you name it. That's an example of our online learning enhancements. The children will click on those various subjects to get the different activities that will relate to their learning. There's an example of a Year 3 communication unit There's a little cartoon about Helen Keller, communication, and then there's a story underneath about Jesus healing the blind. And so communication and vision are the themes in this little learning enhancement. Here's another one, extension activity on the subdivisions of Australia over history. Now, there's accountability in home education with Australian Christian homeschooling. We outline the success criteria. There's learning intentions in every unit of work. There are scoring strips. There are vocabulary signatures. The children need to learn their vocab and they can't progress till the parent signs off on it. There are check-up quizzes. The parent signs off on the check-up quiz to make sure that learning is happening. I will show you that in a minute. There are tests. The parents, again, signing off before the child does a self-test or a final test. So there's accountability for the child learning. And the families at the end of every month send their tests to Australian Christian Homeschooling. We record the results on the database and that generates a semester report. Here's an example of a first page in a maths unit, and you can see the goals or the learning intention is there. My goals are to add and carry, to learn Roman numerals, to learn multiplying, etc., etc. There's a scripture verse to memorize. There's a poem about being joyful, and there's a sign-off down the bottom. You can see that yellow strip, which the parent signs off once the child reads that learning intention, that page 1. The child reads that to the parent, and the parent signs off. There's a scoring strip where at the end of every 2 or 3 pages of work, the child has to go to the answer keys and score their work under the parent's supervision. So there's instant feedback as to whether the learning is happening for that child. There's another supervisor's initial. They're all over the units. Here's a timed multiplication sheet, and at the bottom you'll see the parent has to sign off that the child has completed that learning, and it's a speed test in multiplication tables within the particular time allocated. Here's a self-test, and again you can see they're the spelling words the child would have to learn to pass that test, and there's a parent sign off again. So there's accountability right through the program, and the parent is, as I said, supervising, not necessarily teaching. Here is a goal chart. We teach the child to learn to set goals. This is a weekly goal card, and we see vertically the subjects of maths and English and social studies, science. Horizontally, M stands for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So the child sets their goal and has that posted in front of where they're learning, where they can see it, and they can see their goals for that day, each day, and they cross them off whenever they finish those goals. So it's a very good way to teach children to set goals and to achieve goals. Here is an example of a yearly star chart, and it's divided up into the 4 terms of the year, and whenever a child passes a test, they get a star in the week that they pass that test. For example, in term 1, in the maths horizontal row, this child, whose name is Teenan Sample, passed a maths test in week 3, in week 6, and week 9. There are the stars for maths tests for that term. And you can see English, social studies, science, word building, health, New Testament, and scripture memory there. And it's all in front of the child. They can see, I'm not a fool, I'm not dopey, I am smart, I am achieving. It's very good for the child's self-esteem. Here is a parent supervisor's progress card where the parent records the student scores. Can they get into university is always a question that people ask. And so I've done various studies. Here's an example of a study I did years ago, and it was a study of 438 of our graduates, and we found 36% had gained entry to a bachelor degree, 21% of those respondents got into diploma courses, 43% into apprenticeship and traineeships. And those ongoing studies bring more and more data to us to show that, yes, that child can get into university, they can get into TAFE, they can go on and learn in post-schooling study pathways. So the approaches that we have, there's a system approach, which is it's a mastery learning approach. 80% is the pass mark for our kids. It's self-paced. The child can go at their own rate, at their own pace. The context is that we show them and they learn critical academic content, the important stuff that children should be learning, as shown in the Australian curriculum. They're learning social education as well within the family and the broader community, as we've already shown. They're learning through, now Vygotsky in theory talks about the parents being the best mediators to take a child from the unknown to the known. He calls it through the zone of proximal development. And I've talked about the PED. The resources that we have are very high quality instructional documents that are designed by professional curriculum developers, not just teachers, but teachers who are professional curriculum designers and developers. That's important. And the resources we have, they stick to the point. If you're learning multiplication, that's what you're going to get. You will not get extraneous outside ideas that can distract from the learning. And that's demonstrated by educational psychologists who say that there's too much distraction from the main game when you're trying to teach a topic in education. And it's self-instructional. The teacher is built in to that curriculum. The pedagogical approaches are individualized, it's personalized learning, it's guided instruction, it's built on the idea of minimize what the working memory is of the child, minimize the challenges so that the child can just learn the key elements of the learning, and learning doesn't take place until information is transferred from the working memory, which can hold about between 5 and 7 things, transferring from the working memory to the long-term memory, from short-term memory to long-term memory. That's when learning takes place. That's cognitive load theory. It's all about how the brain works with children and adults who learn. Ultimately, it's all about family. Strong family, strong learning. So in Australian Christian homeschooling, we are really committed to supporting families to do it their way. We just provide excellent educational materials and educational support for families as they seek to raise their children in a strong family way using Christian education materials. And that's what we want to see. Happy families. God bless you all. I hope you've got a bit of an idea about Australian Christian homeschooling and about homeschooling in general. And here are some of the references that I've referred to. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity of sharing with you today about homeschooling and about Australian Christian homeschooling. Bye for now.